Hi everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and today I'm going to show you how to weave in the ends on your crochet. I'm going to show you 3 different techniques: using a crochet hook, using a needle, and then Clover recently sent me this Snag Repair Needle for free to try out and review for you. And I'm going to give it a shot because I watched a demonstration on how this can be used to weave in ends, and I want to show you how that works as well. So let's get started. This is a blanket square that I made a long time ago and never did get around to weaving in the ends. And as you can see, I have several ends here that need to be woven in. So what do I mean by weaving in? Well, the general concept when you have your tails left over from crocheting is that you're going to hide them inside the stitches in such a way that they're not going to pull out. So let's try with the crochet hook first. This is my least favorite way of doing it. I find that the crochet hook, if it's small enough to go into the stitches easily, it snags the yarn and splits the yarn. If it's too big, then it doesn't fit into the stitches evenly and it can pull the stitches wonky and throw off my tension. But if you're ever in a pinch, this is a way you can do it if you don't have a needle handy. Okay, so generally, whichever way we're doing it, what we're going to do is find some stitches and we're going to work vertically up the stitches. Don't work across the stitches because they'll have a tendency to cinch them together. So we're going to work vertically up the stitches and then back down again. So let's turn this way. I'm going to go, well, I've got a lot of ends there, so why don't I go here? And let's go up this way through the stitches. So I'm going to stick my hook in from the top part and just kind of grab some random threads. And you always do this on the wrong side of the work, but the point is I shouldn't be able to see too much of my hook. Wherever I see my hook, I'm going to see the yarn. And you'll notice that I'm weaving into the same color so that it doesn't show where I wove in the yarn. So now I have my hook going all the way through to where that yarn is coming out of. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. There we go. My hook's going all the way through to where the yarn is. So I'm going to take the end of the yarn and place it on my hook and use the hook to pull that through and try not to snag anything. And as you can see, this is where it gets a little tight. There we go. Pull that through, and there I have the yarn woven through in this direction. Now, if I just left it like that, it would have a tendency to slip out. So I'm going to turn this around the other way, and I'm going to go back in a similar position, but not quite the same spot, through all the stitches here. There we go. I've gone through several stitches here, and then I'm going to take this end and pull it back down this way. There we go. And now that's hidden inside those stitches, and because it's looped, it's not likely to pull out. Now, most people will tell you that is all you need to do. I tend to be a worrywart, so I will go back up one more time at least. If it's a really slippery yarn, I might go back up and back down again one more time. But I tend to go at least this one more time up again. So there, I've stuck my hook in. And it's okay if you split the yarn when you're going through the stitches. In fact, if you split the yarn, it's more likely to hold it better. It's just harder to get your hook back through. And notice I'm turning my hook downwards so it's not snagging on those stitches that I picked up. And there we go. Now I'm going to consider that done. I'm going to get out my handy dandy cutter, which I carry with me whenever I'm crocheting. This is my Clover cutting tool. I think they call it a circular cutter pendant, but I got this ages and ages ago, and I put it on a rainbow cord so I don't lose it. But now I just take my cutter and slice off that yarn right there. And you can't even see where I hid that end. I mean, it's very well hidden in there because it's the same color. If it was a different color, you'd see it in the same way that you see the yarn carried here in these stitches. You'd see little bits of it coming through. So that's how you do it with the crochet hook. Now let's move on to using a needle. These are also Clover needles, and these are my favorites. I've been using them for the last few years, and they're pretty much the only needles I like to use these days. They come in this nifty little carrying case, which is great because it's brightly colored and it's large and it's easier to keep track of than individual needles. And inside there are 3 needles. 2 of them are larger ones and one of them is a smaller one. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but there we go. So you can see this one is the smaller one. For this particular yarn, I'm going to go ahead and use the larger one. And now you'll notice that they all have this bent tip. And that's part of what I love about them. The bent tip lets you hold the needle at a different angle when you're picking up the stitches, and it's more comfortable and it picks up the stitches more easily. It's a slight difference, but it really makes a big difference when you're doing it, especially when you're doing a lot of it. So let's try this blue yarn. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to do this yarn because I want to show you. Do you see how this yarn's kind of sitting off by itself? And there's no yellow right here. It's in a sea of blue, right? And I just said that we don't want to weave into a sea of the other color. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this yarn and bring it down into the center and weave it in down here. So first threading the needle, and this is a little trick my mom taught me. Fold the yarn over the end of the needle. Pinch it really tight up close to the edge of the needle and slide the needle out. That's going to crimp the yarn and give you this little tiny bubble of yarn, which is then much easier to thread into the eye of the needle than this kind of rough end would be. Okay, my needle is threaded, and now I'm going to do the same kind of motion that I did with the hook, except instead of going backwards and pulling the yarn through, I'm just going to go forwards and push the yarn through. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. There we go. So let's go down into the center here, and I'm just going to go under one stitch here just to catch it and hold it in place. And then I'm just going down through, and you can see I'm never going through to the other side. You can't see my needle on the other side. I'm just picking up just one loop on the outside here. And I'm going straight through. And I'm okay to split the yarn sometimes, but I'm going straight through into the middle. And then I'm going to pull this through. And you don't want to pull too tight because you don't want to pinch the stitches. Make sure you tug on your stitches if you think they're pinched so that they loosen up again. And then I went down. Now I'm going to go back up, and again I'm going right near it and then back into that same track, because that'll help me split the yarn a little bit more too. That's up, and then because I am paranoid, I'm going straight back down again. And you can see how this bent tip helps me to pick up the end of that needle. If I didn't have the bent tip, I would be holding this like this, and that's a little bit more awkward to hold. So this is just slightly more ergonomic than a straight tip. And there we go, all the way through, and cut off my tail. Now what happens if you're trying to weave in ends and your tail is too short to weave it in? Well, because if I thread this on a needle, I'm going to have a hard time carrying that back through the fabric. Well, there's a couple things you can do, and before I cut it, I'm going to show you. One thing you can do is you can take your needle all by itself and weave that in where you want it to go. Then you come back with this yarn, and sometimes it helps to wet it a little bit, but you carefully thread this into this needle while it is in the fabric, which used to be the only way that you could really accomplish this. And it's fiddly and hard to thread this needle while it's sitting in the fabric. You can see I split the yarn. Hang on, let me get it a little wet. Okay. There we go, a little bit wet, and then we can stick it through a little better here. Okay, there we go, and now it's threaded in, and I could pull that straight through, and that's nice and easy, right? Okay, well that was fine, and that's the way we've always done it with short tails. But then Clover sent me this fun tool to try out, and this solves that problem without having to try and thread the needle while it's sitting in the fabric. So let me get this open. In the package, there are two sizes of needles. There's a big one and a little one. For this yarn, I'm going to go ahead and use the big one. Set that aside. And the thing that's different about this needle, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and hope it focuses okay. It's right up here. Instead of having an eye, there we go, I think we can see it now. Instead of having an eye, it has a top like a screw, like a big long screw. And what that does is as you pull the needle through the fabric, it's going to snag any nearby loose threads and pull them through, which is great for repairing snags, but you can also use it to weave in the end. Especially if you have a really short end, it will pull it on through. So suppose I had an end that was only about that long. That's going to be very hard to get into the eye of a needle. Even if I shove the needle in first and then try to thread it through the eye, it's still going to be very difficult. So let's try using this instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this needle, ignore this thread for now, but I'm going to go in near the thread and put this needle wherever I want it to go. Okay? And as I pull it through, it should snag on that thread. And to help it, I'm going to put the end of the thread down near this needle so that it can snag it as it pulls. And there, did you see it started to snag it? Now I'm going to go back through that thread where it's caught up and pull it through again. You hear that tearing sound? That's actually it catching on little threads and pulling them through. So now as I pull it through, you can see that end is starting to go in. And this actually splits the yarn really well, and almost, I mean, if this was wool, it would felt it. So this is a great way to get the yarn really securely in there. And there we go. The thread is buried. I could go one more time if I wanted to make absolutely sure. The thread is tucked in, it's buried, it's gone. And it works the same way for snags. Let me show you how to use it on a snag. So here I am on the front of my fabric, and suppose I had caught, let's pick this thread here. Suppose I had caught this thread on something and it snagged really badly. There we go. That's pretty ugly, right? And that's hard to fix. There's no way to, you got to find where that thread's going and fix it, and it's just going to tear if I leave it out. So snags are a problem, right? And this happens on sweaters and regular shirts and stuff too. So you fix it with the Clover ruler or Clover needle, just like before. And in this case, what I found is if I kind of twist the needle up in it, it sort of grabs it better on that first pass. So I twist the needle up in the snag and push it back down through to the wrong side of the fabric. And there, it grabbed it a little bit. Now I'm going to go back through the snag and push it down through again. And I just keep doing this 3 or 4 times, and it will grab that and pull it all the way to the opposite side of the fabric. There we go. That was the 4th time through. Let's do one more. There, that's 5 times through. And it's pulled it into the fabric and it's gone. You can't see the snag anymore. It looks like we never had a snag. So that's what this needle is actually intended for, but it's the same thing as weaving in a very short tail of yarn, so it works great for that too. Now these same tools will work for knitting as well, but the technique is a little bit different with knitting, so I'll show you that in another tutorial some other time. In the meantime, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching!